I never thought silence could be so deafening. When my last child's car disappeared down our tree-lined suburban street 3 years ago, something inside me collapsed. 28 years of my life, gone. All those soccer practices, homework fights, birthday parties, and midnight fevers had vanished, leaving nothing but echoing rooms and a refrigerator that stayed suspiciously clean. 3 children raised, launched into the world, and what was my reward? A text message on Mother's Day and the occasional obligatory Sunday call that always ended with, "Sorry mom, gotta go." I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because what happened next changed everything, and I need you to understand why I did what I did. My name is Elaine, and for nearly 3 decades, I was simply mom. My identity had been so completely wrapped up in my children that when they all finally left, I didn't know who I was anymore. My husband, Richard, had checked out years before, physically present but mentally absent, finding refuge in his woodworking shop in the garage while I managed everything else. 2 years after our youngest left, Richard announced he'd found something missing in his life. Her name was Cynthia, she was 15 years younger, and she worked at his accounting firm. The divorce was quick and surprisingly amicable. I was too numb to fight. I spent the first year after the divorce in a fog. The 5-bedroom house that once bustled with activity now felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I'd walk through the rooms running my fingers over my children's old possessions, artifacts of who they once were. My son Tyler's baseball trophies, my daughter Madison's dance competition photos, my youngest Emma's art projects, all collecting dust in rooms they no longer visited. My 3 children had scattered across the country. Tyler, my oldest at 32, was an investment banker in New York. Madison, 29, had followed her husband to Seattle for his tech job. Emma, 26, was finding herself in Austin's music scene. They all had their reasons for staying away, reasons that felt hollow to me but made perfect sense to them. "Mom, flights at Christmas are just insane," Tyler would explain. "It's Brad's family's turn this year," Madison would say. "I've got this huge gig opportunity, Mom. You understand, right?" Emma would plead. I always said I understood. I always lied. The breaking point came last November. I'd spent weeks planning Thanksgiving dinner, ordering a heritage turkey, preparing all their childhood favorites. I'd even redecorated the guest rooms, bought new sheets, and placed little welcome baskets on each bed. 2 days before Thanksgiving, the calls came, one after another, like dominoes falling. Tyler had a work emergency. Madison's husband had surprised her with a trip to Maui. Emma had been invited to a career-changing music festival. I sat at my meticulously set dining room table for 6 hours that Thanksgiving, alone with enough food to feed 15 people. I drank 3 glasses of wine and then did something I'd never done before. I took every family photo off the wall and stored them in the attic. I was invisible to my children, so why should they stare at me from my walls? That night, scrolling mindlessly through social media, I saw it, an advertisement for a beachfront villa in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. "Escape the holiday blues," it read. "Christmas special, 50% off." I booked it before I could think twice. I didn't tell my children. For once, I wasn't going to be waiting by the phone for calls that wouldn't come, or setting empty places at a table where no one would sit. 2 weeks before Christmas, I hired a house sitter, packed 2 suitcases, and boarded a plane. I sent a simple group text to my children, "Taking care of me this Christmas. Merry Christmas to you all. Love, Mom." The barrage of texts and calls that followed gave me a bitter satisfaction. Suddenly, they all had questions, concerns, even indignation. "Mom, what do you mean you won't be home? We were planning to come this year." I turned my phone off before takeoff and didn't turn it back on for 3 days. Puerto Vallarta in December was exactly what I needed: warm, vibrant, alive. My villa overlooked the ocean, and for the first time in years, I slept with the windows open, letting the sound of waves lull me to sleep instead of the hollow echo of an empty house. On my 3rd morning there, I ventured to a small cafe near the beach. The owner, a woman named Sophia who looked about my age, greeted me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Alone for the holidays?" she asked, setting down my coffee. Something in her kind eyes broke down a wall I didn't know I had built. I told her everything, about my children, the divorce, the empty house. She listened without interruption, refilling my coffee twice. When I finished, she simply said, "Today, you have lunch with me and my family." I tried to protest, but she wouldn't hear it. "My son Carlos will pick you up at 2. No arguments. That lunch changed everything. Sophia's family was large and boisterous, 3 generations under one roof. Her adult children lived nearby, and her grandchildren ran between tables in the courtyard behind her cafe. They welcomed me without question, passing dishes family style and insisting I try everything. In Mexico, Sophia told me, family is not just blood. It is who you choose to love and who chooses to love you back. I returned to the cafe the next day, and the next. Soon, I was helping in the kitchen, learning to make authentic mole sauce and proper churros. Sophia's daughter-in-law taught me to dance salsa in the evenings when they pushed the tables aside and turned up the music. Her grandchildren called me Tia Elaine and dragged me to the beach to build sandcastles. On Christmas Eve, as we all gathered in Sophia's courtyard under strings of colored lights, her son Carlos raised his glass. "To Elaine," he said, "our American family." I cried that night, but not from sadness. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as someone's mother or ex-wife, but as Elaine, a woman with value beyond what she could do for others. When it was time to return home in January, I hugged Sophia goodbye with a promise, "I'll be back. We will be waiting," she assured me. Back in my cold, empty house in Connecticut, I made a decision. I called a realtor the next day. Within a month, my house was on the market. I started researching permanent residency in Mexico. I enrolled in intensive Spanish classes at the community college. My children, of course, thought I'd lost my mind. "Mom, you can't just sell the house. Where will we stay when we visit?" Madison demanded during one of our now frequent calls. "Hotels work wonderfully," I replied, surprising myself with my lack of guilt. "They have room service." "This is about Thanksgiving, isn't it?" Tyler accused. "You're punishing us." "No," I said honestly. "This is about me finally living my life instead of waiting for all of you to remember I exist." Emma was more direct. "Mom, you're having a midlife crisis." Perhaps I was. But for the first time since my children were born, I was making choices based solely on what I wanted, not what would make their lives easier or better. The house sold quickly, a young family with 3 small children. As I handed them the keys, the mother thanked me with tears in her eyes. "It's our dream home," she said. I didn't tell her that it had once been mine. By April, I had moved into a modest but beautiful apartment above Sophia's cafe. I used some of the house money to invest in her business, becoming a part owner. I learned to make traditional Mexican dishes and started teaching English classes to local children in the afternoons. My life took on a rhythm that felt authentic. Mornings in the cafe, afternoons teaching, evenings spent on my balcony watching the sunset or joining impromptu gatherings in the courtyard. I made friends, real friends who called just to check in, who brought soup when I caught a cold, who invited me into their homes not out of obligation but because they enjoyed my company. I started a small book club that met weekly at the cafe. I took up painting, setting up an easel on the beach to capture the spectacular sunsets. I adopted a street dog with one eye and a perpetually wagging tail whom I named Lucky. I went on a few dates with a silver-haired American expat named James who taught scuba diving to tourists. For the first time in my adult life, I was building an identity that wasn't tethered to being someone's mother or wife. I was reinventing myself, and it felt exhilarating. My children's reactions evolved from concern to confusion to a reluctant acceptance. Our calls became less frequent. Now it was me saying, "Sorry, I've got plans," or "Can we talk tomorrow? I'm heading to a salsa class." About 8 months after my move, Madison announced she was pregnant. It should have been a moment of pure joy, but her next words cut deep. "We're hoping you'll move back, Mom. I'm going to need help with the baby." The old Elaine would have started packing immediately. This new version of me took a deep breath and said, "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. I can't wait to meet my grandchild. You and Brad are welcome to visit anytime." The silence that followed spoke volumes. She had expected me to drop everything, to reclaim my role as the family caretaker. When I didn't, she ended the call quickly, saying she had another appointment later that night. As I sat on my balcony watching the stars with Lucky at my feet, I realized something profound. I loved my children, fiercely, completely, eternally, but I no longer needed them to feel whole. I had found parts of myself in Mexico that I never knew existed, and I wasn't willing to abandon them again. The real test came the following Christmas. My children, perhaps sensing that I had truly changed, or maybe just curious about this new life I'd built, all decided to visit together. At the same time, I arranged for them to stay at a lovely beachfront hotel a short walk from the cafe. When their shared taxi pulled up, I felt a strange mix of emotions: joy at seeing them, anxiety about their judgment, and a quiet confidence that whatever happened, I would be okay. They looked exactly the same but somehow different, older, more established in their identities. Madison was showing at 6 months pregnant, Tyler had grown a beard, and Emma had dyed her hair purple. They hugged me with a caution that broke my heart a little. "Mom," Tyler said, looking around at the bustling cafe where locals greeted me by name, "this is not what we expected." "What did you expect?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I don't know," Emma admitted. "A lonely retirement community? A cry for help?" I laughed. "Well, sorry to disappoint you." The first day was awkward. They followed me around like tourists, watching with bewilderment as I worked the morning shift at the cafe, expertly making café con leche and chatting in Spanish with the regulars. They seemed stunned when Sophia's grandchildren ran to me for hugs, calling me Tia Elaine and begging me to take them to the beach later. "You speak Spanish now?" Madison kept asking, as if I'd suddenly grown a second head. At dinner that night, in Sophia's courtyard with her entire extended family, I watched my children struggle to reconcile the mother they remembered, the one who existed solely to meet their needs, with this woman who had a life completely separate from them. "So," Tyler said during a quiet moment, "when are you coming back?" "Back where?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Home, Mom. To the States. This was a nice adventure. But it's time to come home, isn't it?" I looked around the courtyard, at Sophia directing her sons as they grilled fish, at Carlos teaching his youngest daughter to dance, at Lucky sleeping under my chair, at the string lights reflecting in the glasses of wine. "I am home," I said simply. Madison burst into tears. "But I need you," she sobbed. "The baby is coming, and I don't know what I'm doing." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You'll figure it out," I said gently. "Just like I did. And when you need advice or support, I'm a phone call away, something I rarely got from any of you these past years." Emma's expression hardened. "So this is punishment? For not calling enough?" "No," I said firmly. "This is me finally living my life after putting it on hold for nearly 30 years. This is me refusing to sit by the phone waiting for calls that rarely come or clearing my schedule for visits that get cancelled. This is me choosing to be somewhere I'm wanted every day, not just when it's convenient." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken recriminations and realizations. Tyler, always the peacemaker, finally spoke. "We took you for granted." It was the first honest thing any of them had said since arriving. "Yes," I agreed. "You did." What followed was the most real conversation we'd had in years. They talked about their busy lives, their assumption that I would always be there waiting, their shock when I wasn't. I talked about the loneliness, the invisibility of being a mother whose job was deemed complete, the hurt of being remembered only when I was needed. "I don't want you to feel guilty," I told them as the night grew late and Sophia tactfully gave us privacy. "I want you to understand. I raised you to be independent, to build your own lives. I'm just finally taking my own advice." By the end of their week-long visit, something had shifted. They stopped expecting me to cater to them, instead joining the rhythm of my new life. Emma helped in the cafe, charming the customers with her broken Spanish. Tyler took a genuine interest in my investment in the business, offering useful advice on expanding. Madison and I had long talks on the beach about motherhood and identity, Conversations where I was honest about the challenges in a way I never had been before. On their last night, Carlos and his wife hosted a beach bonfire. As we sat under the stars, Emma suddenly raised her glass. "To Mom," she said, "for teaching us that it's never too late to find yourself." The genuine admiration in her eyes made my heart swell. After they left, our relationship changed. The calls became more regular, more meaningful. They started asking about my life instead of just talking about theirs. Madison sent me ultrasound pictures with notes like, "Can't wait for you to meet her," in Mexico, accepting that I wouldn't be moving back. 3 months later, I flew to Seattle for the birth of my granddaughter, staying for 2 weeks to help. But then I returned home, to my apartment above the cafe, to Lucky, to my book club and painting classes, to Sophia and her family who had become my family too. Tyler visits every few months now, combining business trips with long weekends in Puerto Vallarta. Emma came for an extended stay last summer, finding inspiration for her music in the local scene. Madison and Brad bring my granddaughter twice a year, and we FaceTime weekly. They've stopped asking when I'm coming back. Instead, they ask when they can come visit again. They've accepted that this is where I belong now, not because I don't love them, but because I finally learned to love myself too. Sometimes, late at night on my balcony with the ocean breeze in my hair and Lucky snoring at my feet, I think about that woman who sat alone at a Thanksgiving table set for 5, surrounded by empty chairs. I wish I could tell her that the emptiness she felt wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning. I raised 3 children and then found myself alone. But in that solitude, I discovered that I was never really empty, just waiting to be filled with a different kind of love. The kind that begins with loving yourself enough to build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's presence to feel complete. To the mothers listening who feel invisible, forgotten, or taken for granted, I want you to know, your worth isn't measured by how often your adult children call or visit. It's not determined by how many family members sit at your holiday table. Your value exists independently of your role as someone's mother, and it's waiting for you to recognize it. It took me flying to another country to find myself, but your journey might be different. It might be a class you've always wanted to take, a trip you've dreamed of, or simply the courage to say no when you're expected to say yes. Whatever it is, I hope you find it before life passes you by. My name is Elaine, and at 62, I finally became more than just someone's mother. I became myself. What about you? Have you ever had to reinvent yourself after a major life change? Have you felt invisible in a role that once defined you? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life journeys of transformation and self-discovery. Remember, it's never too late to write a new chapter. Sometimes, the most beautiful part of your story is just waiting to begin.